Welcome to Night Shift Knowledge, a quiet place in the late hours where you can finally let go of the day. Take a moment to settle in, soften your shoulders, and allow the busy world to fade completely into the background. Tonight, we are going on a gentle journey through the fascinating corners of science, biology, and history. Before we begin, please know that the screen will fade to dark very soon. You can safely rest your eyes and leave this video playing as you drift off to sleep. I would also love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below with a general topic you would like me to cover in a future video. It is always a pleasure to read your ideas and shape this channel around what brings you peace. If you find comfort in this space, a like and a subscribe would be deeply appreciated. To ensure the next video quietly finds its way to you, please tap the notification bell. So as your breathing slows and your room grows a little darker, let your curiosity drift along with my voice. Let us begin. For centuries, the story of the ancient Maya has been told by the jungle itself. It's a story written in stone and then swallowed by green. Imagine standing at the heart of Tikal, one of the great Maya cities. The air is thick and humid. Massive limestone pyramids rise from the forest floor. Their steps climb towards the sky. You hear the distant calls of howler monkeys and the rustle of leaves. It feels ancient and profoundly alone. This is the image we've carried for generations. The lost city, a place of mystery, reclaimed by nature. Isolated temples peeking through a sea of trees. For a long time, archaeology could only follow this image. It focused on those grand ceremonial centers, the places where the stone was tallest and the carvings most clear. But the Petén rainforest of Guatemala is the heartland of the classic Maya. It's one of the most formidable environments on Earth. This isn't a friendly park. It's a dense, tangled living wall, vines as thick as your arm, a canopy that blocks the sun. Jaguars, snakes, insects. This jungle protects its secrets with thorns and distance. For an archaeologist on the ground, the work is heroic and painfully slow. A team might spend an entire season cutting through just a few hundred meters of undergrowth. They can only see what's right in front of them. A fallen stone. A mound that might be natural or might be a palace. The forest floor hides everything. A pyramid could be just 100 feet away and you'd walk right past it. You simply can't see it. So the map of the Maya world for so long was a map of islands, splendid city-states like Tikal, Calakmul, and Karakol. They were known to be connected by trade, rivalry, and royal marriages, but between them, the maps were largely blank. A vague green emptiness labeled hinterlands. A mystery. This led to a great debate that simmered for decades. Just how many people lived here? Was this a civilization of relatively sparse cities, surrounded by small villages and wild jungle? Or was it something more? The evidence on the ground was fragmentary. It suggested powerful kings and spectacular ceremonies, but it couldn't settle the bigger question. The prevailing story before the year 2022 was one of brilliant but isolated urban centers. City-states that ruled their immediate territories. A civilization that reached its peak and then, for reasons we still puzzle over, faded away. The jungle crept back in. The cities were lost to memory. But that story always had a hole in the middle of it, a nagging question. The jungle is so thick, so relentless. What if we were only seeing the very tips of the icebergs? What if Tikal wasn't an island, but merely the tallest peak in a vast submerged mountain range? A range made of stone and earth, completely hidden beneath a green ocean. How do you find a lost city when you can't walk through the door? When the very air is a curtain? For generations, archaeologists knew they were missing most of the picture. They could feel it. The scale of the pyramids at Tikal suggested immense labour. The art spoke of vast kingdoms. But the proof, the physical proof of a widespread population, was buried, not under sand like in Egypt, but under a living, breathing, impenetrable blanket of trees. The mystery then wasn't really if there was more to find. Everyone knew there was more. The mystery was one of scale. Just how much more? Were the spaces between the great cities truly empty? Or were they filled with towns, farms, roads, and homes? Was the Maya world a collection of brilliant points of light in a dark wilderness? Or was it a continuous galaxy? This was the great, unanswerable question. The jungle wouldn't give up its secrets to a machete. It wouldn't yield to a satellite, which sees only the top of the canopy. The truth was, down there, beneath the leaves, a complete landscape, frozen in time, a lost city, or perhaps a lost world waiting in the dark. To find it, archaeology needed a new kind of vision, a way to see through the impossible, a way to strip away the green and see the grey stone beneath. The answer wouldn't come from the ground looking up, it would come from the sky looking down with a strange new light. So that's the image. The lost city, alone in the jungle. For over a century, that was the puzzle archaeologists tried to solve. They hacked their way through dense undergrowth, mapping one pyramid or one plaza at a time. It was slow, punishing work. The jungle hid everything. A mound covered in vines could be a natural hill, or it could be a palace. You could stand on top of a temple and not even know it. The scale of the mystery was simply too big. How do you find a lost city when you can't even see the ground beneath your feet? The answer didn't come from a machete. It came from a laser, a technology born not for archaeology, but for mapping planets. It's called LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. Imagine a small plane flying in a straight line, back and forth, over the endless green carpet of the Petan jungle. It's a monotonous drone of an engine. But beneath that plane, a device is firing, not bullets, but photons. It sends out over 500,000 laser pulses every single second. Each pulse is a tiny point of light. It races down from the plane and hits the first thing it meets, the top of a mahogany tree, a ceiba leaf, a branch. For most pulses, that's where they stop. They bounce back to a sensor, recording the height of the canopy. But some laser pulses are smaller than the gaps in the foliage. They slip through and keep racing down. They hit a lower branch, a thick vine, the forest floor. And a few, just a precious few, find a different kind of obstacle. They hit ancient, weathered limestone. They strike the steep side of a pyramid shrouded for 1,000 years. They ping off a long, straight causeway. Then they race back to the sensor, carrying a secret. A precise measurement of distance from the plane to the hidden stone. The plane does this for days, for weeks. It flies a grid pattern until it's covered an area of northern Guatemala larger than a modern megacity. Over 2,000 square kilometers, it collects billions upon billions of data points. A chaotic cloud of echoes, a digital blizzard. Then comes the magic, the digital stripping. Using powerful computers, technicians can tell the difference between a return from a leaf and a return from stone. They classify the points. With a few clicks, they delete every single point that came from a living thing. Every tree, every shrub, every vine. They peel the jungle away like lifting a blanket. What's left is a ghost landscape, a bare earth model of stunning clarity. It's the ground, as it truly is, and on that ground the past is written in high resolution. This was the goal of the PACUNAM LiDAR initiative. a collaboration between Guatemalan archaeologists, international scholars, and the Pacanam Foundation. Their mission was audacious: to see the unseen. Now, picture the moment of discovery. Not in the jungle, but in a quiet lab. Archaeologist Francisco Estrada Belli, one of the project leads, sits at a computer. He's spent his entire career walking through that jungle, getting hints of something bigger. He's felt it. He clicks open one of the first processed LiDAR files. A map of an area he knows intimately. An area that, on every traditional map, is just a blank green expanse labeled jungle. The image loads. He later described the moment. His breath caught. His heart raced. Because what he saw was not empty. It was not blank. It was everything. Where maps showed untouched forest, the LiDAR revealed a sprawling metropolis. A precise grid of causeways connected grand plazas. Dozens of small pyramids clustered around larger ones. The outlines of reservoirs, the rigid lines of defensive walls. It wasn't one lost city. It was 100, all interconnected, a vast, ancient urban network. He zoomed in. Everywhere he looked, there were rectangles, the footprints of thousands of houses. They covered the hillsides and lined the ridges. They were packed together, neighborhood after neighborhood. It was a beehive of human activity, frozen in limestone. The shock was profound. He was looking at a complete blueprint of a civilization. A blueprint that had been sitting there, right beneath his feet, all along. He described it as a moment of humility and of awe. The jungle had kept it secret until the laser found a way to listen to the stone. This was the eureka moment, repeated in labs and offices as more data came in. The initial survey area was just a slice, a sample. And in that one slice, they found over 60,000 previously unknown structures. Not just the grand palaces, but the homes of the people. The infrastructure, the very fabric of a society. The implications were immediate and staggering. If this much was hidden in just this one area, how much more was out there? The classic image of isolated Maya city-states, like lonely islands in a green sea, evaporated in an instant. In its place was a megalopolis, a continuous, engineered, densely populated landscape. The laser had done more than find ruins. It had found a lost world. A world of astonishing scale and complexity. A world we are only just beginning to understand. Next, we'll step into that digital landscape. We'll walk those causeways and explore the blueprint of the megalopolis that LiDAR revealed. So you cannot see the city for the jungle. But what if you could strip the jungle away? Every leaf, every vine, every tree. What if you could peel it back like a blanket and reveal the bare earth beneath? That is exactly what happened. We heard about the laser, the LiDAR. It sent billions of pulses down through that green roof. And what came back was not just a single lost city. It was a blueprint, a sprawling, intricate, shocking blueprint for an entire civilization. The researchers loaded the processed data. They hit render, and the jungle vanished. In its place was a map. But not a map of emptiness. It was a map of staggering density. A map of endless, meticulous human design. Imagine a vast sheet of paper the size of a major modern metropolis. Now imagine that paper is completely covered in tiny, precise dots. Each one is a building, a home, a temple, a wall. There were over 60,000 of them. 60,000 previously unknown structures, all hidden in plain sight. This wasn't a single city waiting to be found. This was a megalopolis, a continuous urban and suburban landscape across northern Guatemala. The scale is almost impossible to comprehend, but let me try. Picture the great ceremonial centers you know, like Tikal or El Mirador, with their towering pyramids that rise above the forest floor. The LiDAR showed those, of course, but it showed they weren't isolated islands of stone. They were the peaks of a mountain range, and the mountains were made of people. Surrounding each great plaza were tens of thousands of small, rectangular platforms. These were the foundations of ordinary Maya homes, wooden houses with thatched roofs long gone, but their stone bases remained. They clustered around the grand centers, they spread out along ridges, they filled valleys. They were everywhere. The landscape wasn't just occupied, it was packed. And connecting it all was a network of stone roads. The Maya called them sakbiob, or white ways. These weren't simple paths. They were raised causeways, built up with stone and plaster, elevated highways through the jungle. The LiDAR maps showed them with stunning clarity. They shot out from the great cities like spokes from a hub. They connected major centers to smaller towns. They linked towns to tiny villages. Imagine one of these causeways. It's wide enough for a procession. Its surface is smooth plaster, shining almost white in the sun. It runs perfectly straight for miles. It cuts through swamps and over hills. It doesn't go around. It goes through. This isn't a trail made by feet. This is engineered infrastructure. A statement of political power and connection. You could walk from one city to another on a dedicated, maintained road system. The map revealed a web of them, a civilization woven together by stone. Then there are the administrative centers, not just the famous royal capitals, but dozens, perhaps hundreds, of smaller civic complexes. Places with their own small pyramids, their own plazas, their own palaces. These were the neighborhood hubs, the local town halls of the Maya world. The LiDAR showed they were evenly spaced across the landscape, a deliberate pattern of governance and control. And the palaces. The data revealed enormous, sprawling complexes, vast ranges of rooms built around courtyards. They weren't just homes for kings. They were seats of bureaucracy. They were economic centers. They were statements in stone. The sheer number of them suggested a society with many centers of power, not just a few famous kings, but a whole layered aristocracy spread across this immense territory. All of this, the homes, the roads, the palaces, the pyramids, it forces one undeniable conclusion. This wasn't a sparse civilization of a few million people dotted around empty jungle. This was a vast, integrated society, a society of staggering population. Before the laser, estimates for the classic Maya population were conservative. A few million, perhaps, in the entire lowlands. The new map changed that number forever. With 60,000 new structures and a clear picture of how densely they were packed, the math changed. Archaeologists now estimate that during the classic period, from around 250 to 900 AD, the Maya lowlands were home to somewhere between 7 and 11 million people. Let that number sit for a moment. 7 to 11 million. That's on par with the population of ancient Rome at its height. It rivals the great civilizations of Egypt or Mesopotamia. But this was in the tropics. In a jungle everyone thought could only support small, scattered groups. This number transforms the Maya from a mysterious, fragmented culture into one of the most populous and sophisticated societies of the ancient world. The blueprint revealed by the laser is a portrait of a metropolis without a single city limit. A continuous urban fabric. A civilization that had solved for centuries the problems of density, transportation, and administration on a colossal scale. But this raises an immediate, pressing question. A question of survival. How do you feed 7 to 11 million people in a jungle? Where does the water come from? Where are the farms? The blueprint had an answer for that too. An answer hidden in the very shape of the earth itself. And it would change our understanding of how the Maya truly engineered their world. So we have this blueprint, a map of a hidden world. More than 60,000 structures, a megalopolis. And that presents us with an immediate and colossal question. How on earth did they eat? Think of the numbers we just heard. 7 million people. Perhaps even 11 million, all living here in this dense tropical lowland for centuries. This wasn't a handful of scattered villages. This was a vast, interconnected urban society, and every single one of those millions of people needed to be fed every single day. For a long time, the prevailing story was simple. The Maya were a slash-and-burn society. They'd clear a patch of jungle, farm it until the soil was exhausted, and then move on. That model could never support a population of millions. It just doesn't add up. The land couldn't sustain it. The LiDAR map held the answer. It wasn't just a map of buildings, it was a map of the land itself. And when archaeologists looked past the pyramids and the palaces, they saw the true genius of the Maya. They saw the landscape they had engineered, an empire of food. Picture the terrain beneath that jungle canopy. Not as a wild, untamed place, but as a carefully managed, vast, productive garden. First, the LiDAR revealed the wetlands, the low, swampy areas that might seem useless for farming. The Maya saw them differently. They saw potential. The lasers detected intricate geometric patterns in these swamps. A complex network of canals, and between those canals, raised fields. Imagine long, rectangular platforms of rich earth built up from the muck. These were their crop beds. Water from the canals would seep into the fields, keeping the soil moist. The canals themselves were like highways. They transported water, silt, and nutrients. They may have even been stocked with fish and turtles. This was a symbiotic system, a way to farm the water itself. It was intensive, sustainable agriculture, hidden in plain sight beneath the thick swamp reeds and water lilies. And then look at the hillsides, the slopes. The LiDAR didn't just show empty jungle, it showed them sculpted and transformed. Thousands of terraces, long, linear steps carved into the hills. They looked like giant staircases for gods, but they had a profoundly practical purpose. They stopped the precious topsoil from washing away in the heavy rains. They created flat, stable land for planting on terrain that was otherwise too steep. They captured rainwater, letting it soak slowly into the earth instead of running off. This wasn't a few scattered garden plots. This was a complete reshaping of the landscape, a wholesale engineering project on a staggering regional scale. The entire countryside was a carefully calibrated machine for producing food. Now, let's think about what this means. Imagine standing in the center of one of those raised fields in the swamp. Feel the firm, cultivated earth underfoot. Smell the damp, fertile smell of the canals. This isn't a small-scale operation. This is industrial-scale agriculture, centuries before industry. Now turn and look towards the terraced hills in the distance. Every available piece of land is working and producing. This changes everything. The old idea of the Maya constantly moving, exhausting their land, it evaporates. This is a civilization that stayed, that invested, that dug in quite literally. They didn't just adapt to their environment, they rewrote it. They engineered it for maximum yield. And that engineering is the key to the population mystery. A slash-and-burn society is, by nature, limited. It can only support so many people per square mile. But an engineered landscape with wetland fields and hillside terraces is a different beast altogether. its carrying capacity skyrockets. The food produced by these systems could support those huge populations. It could feed the laborers building the pyramids. It could feed the priests, the administrators, and the artisans in the cities. It could support a complex society with specialization, a ruling class, and an army. This was the foundation of the entire Maya world. Not the glittering temples on the surface, but the mud, the water, and the stone. The unglamorous, back-breaking work of digging canals and building terraces, generation after generation. This was the real monument, a living, breathing, growing monument that fed an empire. The LiDAR revealed a truth that ground surveys could almost never see. You can't grasp the scale of a terraced network when you're standing in the middle of it, surrounded by jungle. You can't see the perfect geometry of a wetland field system when you're waist-deep in swamp water. You need the view from above. And from that vantage point, the Maya emerge not as a people struggling against their environment, but as master environmental architects. They turned a challenging seasonal tropical landscape into a breadbasket. They solved the puzzle of how to live there in vast numbers for centuries. So, the blueprint we saw, it was more than a map of cities. It was an instruction manual for survival. A testament to human ingenuity written across 1,000 square kilometers of jungle. They built their world from the ground up, and they built it to last. But such a world, with such high stakes and so many people and so much wealth, it couldn't have been a peaceful paradise. A society this large, this complex, this invested in the land, it would have had much to protect, and much to fear. The LiDAR map had more secrets to reveal, and some of them were written in the language of fear, conflict, and war. So they built a world, a vast, engineered landscape of canals, terraces, and reservoirs. They solved the puzzle of feeding millions in a challenging jungle. But that immense population, that sprawling urban network, it created another kind of pressure. A pressure that builds between neighbors, between kingdoms. A pressure that eventually turns to war. And the LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, revealed that too, in shocking, undeniable detail. When you peel back the canopy with this technology, you don't just find pyramids and houses and roads. You find the scars of conflict. You find a civilization preparing constantly for attack. Think about the old image we used to have of the Maya, isolated city-states engaged in ritualized warfare, capturing nobles for ceremony. It was a kind of political theater, or so the story went. The laser map tells a different story, a darker one. It shows massive stone walls, not just around cities, but slicing across the landscape, cutting off peninsulas and guarding strategic passes. It reveals fortresses built on steep, inaccessible ridges, watchtowers placed with clear lines of sight over miles of terrain, and moats, deep, wide defensive ditches. These aren't the decorations of ritual. They are the architecture of fear, of long-term existential threat. Imagine standing on one of those walls. The stone is rough under your palm. The jungle humidity is thick in the air. You're looking out over a cleared area, a kill zone, beyond the wall. Your job is to watch for movement in the distant trees, for the glint of an obsidian blade, for the approach of an army from a rival kingdom like Calakmul or El Mirador or Tikal. These cities weren't islands. They were nodes in a packed, competitive network. The LiDAR shows causeways connecting them. But those roads weren't just for trade. They were also invasion routes. One of the most startling revelations was the sheer ubiquity of these defenses. They weren't rare. They were everywhere, integrated into the very fabric of the city. A house here, a temple there, and a towering defensive wall right next to them. This was a society that lived with the reality of war every single day. And the warfare they prepared for was likely brutal and total. We're talking about sieges, cutting off food supplies to densely populated cities. We're talking about raids on the very agricultural infrastructure, burning terraces and poisoning reservoirs. This was a fight for survival, for control of land and water and people. For a long time, the collapse of the classic Maya civilization around the 9th century was framed as a mystery, a slow, quiet fading. Theories focused on climate change, on drought, on environmental degradation, and those factors were absolutely real. But the LiDAR evidence asks a new, urgent question. What happens when a prolonged drought hits a region already stretched to its limit? A region where millions of people are locked in complex, bitter rivalries. The food systems would have been under unimaginable stress. The political alliances would have frayed, the desperation would have grown, and those massive defensive walls? They wouldn't keep out hunger, they might even trap it inside. Warfare wasn't just a side note, it was a critical stressor. Perhaps the spark in a tinderbox of ecological and social pressures. A kingdom under siege with failing crops doesn't just negotiate, it falls. Its people scatter into the jungle. The inscriptions on the monuments stop. The great cities are reclaimed by the roots and the vines. The laser didn't just find lost cities, it found the reason they might have been lost. It painted a picture of a civilization in a state of tense, fortified equilibrium, an equilibrium that was terrifyingly fragile. When the rains became less reliable, when the reservoirs ran lower, that tension would have snapped. The warfare would have shifted from a managed conflict to a desperate struggle, a fight over the last remaining resources. So the story changes. It's no longer a peaceful people mysteriously vanishing. It's a powerful, ingenious, and deeply human civilization. A civilization that achieved incredible things, that built a megalopolis in a jungle and fed millions. But also a civilization that knew conflict, that built walls against its neighbors, that lived with the constant drumbeat of threat. In the end, that combination of brilliance and brutality, of vast population and violent competition, may have been what made it all so vulnerable. The very scale of their success set the stage for their unraveling. We are left with one final image from the lasers. Not of a single lost city, but of a whole landscape etched with the marks of human ambition and human fear. A digital ghost of a world at war with itself. And that leads to a profound and practical problem. Now that we've found this lost world, what do we do with it? We've explored their world, their genius, and their wars. The lasers gave us a map of a civilization we never knew existed. But here's the paradox. We found it, and now we might lose it. Because this story doesn't end with discovery. It begins with it. And it leads to a whole new set of questions. Questions that are far harder to answer. Think about what we now know. 60,000 new structures. An entire megalopolis beneath the trees. It's overwhelming. And in a strange way, it's heartbreaking, because we can never dig it all up. Archaeology has always been a painstaking process. The trowel, the brush. 1 square meter at a time. It takes years, even decades, to understand a single site. Now we have thousands. Only a tiny fraction of those 60,000 structures will ever be physically excavated. It's simply impossible. The scale is too vast. So what do we do with this digital treasure map? Archaeologists now have to be strategic. They have to be detectives with a new kind of evidence. The laser map becomes the master plan. It tells them where to look, where the most important clues might be hidden. They can target a specific pyramid, a particular fortification, or a unique network of canals. The groundwork becomes a confirmation, a way to touch the past and verify what the lasers suggested. But it also becomes a selection, a choice, and every choice means leaving something else undisturbed and unknown, perhaps forever. That's the first challenge, the sheer scale. The second challenge is far more urgent, and it's happening right now. That same digital map, the one that revealed this lost world, is also a potential treasure map for others, for looters. The Petan jungle is remote. It's difficult to patrol, and ancient Maya artifacts are priceless on the black market. Before this survey, looters had to stumble upon a site or rely on rumors. Now, theoretically, the same data could guide them to exact locations, to pyramids still full of artifacts, to tombs untouched for 1,000 years. It's a race against time, a race to protect what we've only just seen. And the threat isn't just from looters, it's from the modern world itself: deforestation, agriculture, and development. These pressures creep into the jungle every day. That canopy, the very thing that hid the cities for centuries, is now under threat. Without the canopy, the sites become exposed and vulnerable. Preservation becomes a monumental task. It's not about guarding one lost temple, it's about guarding an entire lost country. A digital discovery requires physical protection, and that is a colossal new responsibility. Then there's the third challenge, the deepest one, the mystery that remains. The lasers answered so many questions. How did they live? How did they farm? How did they fight? We now have a blueprint for their daily existence, but the ultimate question, the one that's haunted us for generations, still lingers. Why did it end? The classic Maya collapse, around 900 CE. The great cities were abandoned. The population plummeted. Silence returned to the jungle. LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, gave us new clues. It showed us the intensity of their wars, the sheer density of their population, and the incredible strain on their environment. We see a civilization at its peak, but also at its most fragile. A house of cards, unimaginably complex and beautiful, but susceptible to a single gust of wind. Was that gust a prolonged drought, a political rupture, a social revolt, an ecological catastrophe from overuse? The data suggests all of these pressures were present. They were all in the picture. But it doesn't point to a single cause. The collapse, it seems, wasn't a single event. It was a slow unraveling. A complex puzzle where every piece pushed against another. LiDAR doesn't solve that puzzle, but it gives us the board and all the pieces. Now we have to figure out how they fit together. So where does this leave us? With a new kind of archaeology? A philosophical shift. For centuries, we thought of the Maya as a mysterious people building isolated ceremonial centers in a vast empty green wilderness. The jungle was the enemy, the thing that swallowed their cities. Now we know the jungle was their home, their construction material, their livelihood, and their protector. The cities weren't isolated, they were connected. The wilderness wasn't empty, it was packed with life. And our tool for seeing it isn't a trowel anymore. It's a laser. This discovery marks a move from digging to sensing, from uncovering to mapping, from studying a single site to understanding an entire civilization in its context. It's humbling. We can now perceive the true scale of human achievement and the true scale of our ignorance. We know more than ever, and yet we're confronted with how much we can never know. The lost city isn't lost anymore, it's found. but it's found in a form we can't fully hold. We can't walk all its streets, we can't enter all its houses. It exists now in data, in points of light, and in the fragile, vulnerable ground beneath a disappearing forest. The story of the Maya, and the story of archaeology itself, has been rewritten, not by a shovel in the dirt, but by a laser in the sky. And the final chapter of this discovery isn't really a chapter, it's an opening, a door swung wide into a new way of seeing our past. The jungle still holds its secrets, but now we have a way to listen. We have reached the end of tonight's topics, and it is time to let your mind completely unwind. Whatever you learned tonight, let it fade into a soft hum as you drift off. Thank you for being a part of Night Shift Knowledge and sharing this quiet space with me. Remember to leave a topic suggestion for next time if you are still awake, but for now, just rest. Sleep well, and I will be here the next time you need to quiet your mind. Good night.